Writing scholarly journal articles can be very difficult for a lot of students simply because they are so very, very different from a lot of the other sources that you may be used to reading. So what I would like to do today is just kind of walk you through a typical psychology journal article to show you what's in each section, what do you need to pay really close attention to, what things can you kind of skim a little bit more, and kind of things that you need to make sure to look out for that might be otherwise easy to miss. So what I'm going to be doing, I have one particular article that I'm just going to use as my demonstration today. And I want to start off with some of the things that you're going to see on the first page. So this is the layout that you'll generally see in a journal that's published by the APA. Other journals, you'll have a slightly different layout, but they have the same basic information on the first page. And this here is just the top. But the first thing that you always want to look at with any article is the title. And it may sound really obvious, like of course you'd look at the title, but the title is actually very important because this is really going to let you know what's the purpose of this article, what are the key variables that they are studying. So in this case, for example, we know that some of the key variables that they have studied in this particular article are achievement goals, interest, and performance. And again, it may sound really obvious, but I have actually had students before who turn in a summary and they've completely missed one of the key variables that was named in the title. So this can be a way to check and say, make sure you didn't miss some really big chunk of the study. Other stuff that you'll see on the first page that you can ignore when you're reading the article: authors' names, their institutional affiliations, copyright date, all that sort of stuff. You will need some of that information when you create a reference list, but when you're just reading the article for content, this is stuff that you can completely skip for now. On the first page, once you get below the authors' names and so on, the next thing you're always going to see is the abstract. And this is simply the author's one paragraph summary of their own article. And it will look something like this. This screenshot, you can see it's right below where they listed the authors. It doesn't say the word abstract, you're just sort of supposed to know that it's that first paragraph. But you really do want to start with this because this is the overview that will let you know what you should be looking for as you go through this article. So this won't tell you absolutely everything you need to know, but it'll give you that kind of overview before you start getting into the nitty-gritty details. Once you get past the abstract, you're going to start seeing the introduction. And this is not always labeled as introduction. You're just supposed to know that it's the beginning of the article. But this is where the authors are giving you background to this article. So what's the big picture question that they're trying to study? Why is this question so important? What prior research has been done on the topic? And then after they get through the general background, they're going to start telling you, well, why is their study so important? How did it build on prior research? Maybe they're adding in new variables, maybe they're using a different measurement technique or working with a different population from prior research. But they're essentially trying to justify to you, well, hey, even if you know about this other research, why should you care enough to go ahead and read about their particular study? And then at the end of the introduction, they'll usually give you kind of a preview of their method, and they'll also tell you their hypotheses. They might or might not specifically use the word hypothesis. So they might say, we hypothesized that such and such would happen, but they might also say, we expected or we predicted. Those are still hypotheses even if they don't actually use that word. This introduction section is often divided into subsections. So on the next slide, you'll see here just kind of one screenshot where within the introduction section, you can see in the left-hand column, they've got a subsection about reciprocal effects of mastery, goals, and interest. And then in the right-hand column, they had another subsection about the development of interest. And this is just a way to take a long introduction section and kind of make it a little easier to follow where they're going in each part. So once you get past the introduction section, You're going to move on to the methods. The method section, I will tell you right now, is generally pretty boring. It is just dense. It's a very just the facts style of writing, which means you have to pay attention really carefully because sometimes there will be a detail that's in like half a sentence, and if you miss that half a sentence, then you will have completely misunderstood how their study was conducted. But they're going to have subsections here to tell you who were the participants in this study, how were they recruited, what were their procedures? Did they just have people walk in, sit down, and fill out a survey and leave? Did they have to divide people into groups? Did they give groups particular instructions? Did they have to watch a video? There's all sorts of things that could go on here. If it's a longitudinal study, they may tell you what happened at each point in the data collection. So they might say when participants were 5, we did such and such, and when they were 10, we did something else. And then they're going to describe the measures that they have used. So if they gave any surveys or any tests, who created it, what kinds of questions were on it, is it a written survey or an in-person interview, that sort of information. And just like with the introduction, the methods section is often divided into subsections to help you kind of follow the organizational structure. Once you get past this, you're going to get into the results section. And the results section tends to be very heavy on statistics. This is not a statistics class, and I am assuming that you guys do not have a strong background in statistics. So the things that I do expect you to be able to interpret are mean, median, and mode, and any kind of correlation. Anything beyond that, don't worry about it. So here, for example, I've copied a paragraph from this article. It'll have things like this. I know that you don't know what F is, that you don't know what beta is, and that's okay. Don't worry about it, just accept it and move on. What I do expect you to get out of the results section is when they're describing the results in words. So something like this: students high in initial interest and those high in work mastery or low in competitiveness were more likely to adopt mastery goals. And of course, if you were reading this article, they would have already explained what terms like work mastery means or mastery goals. So you should read through the results section, but don't go nuts worrying about the statistics. If you see a correlations chart like this one, don't worry about it. Okay. If you see, sometimes they'll have a diagram like this, you should look at it and look at where the arrows are going and so on, but don't go nuts over the numbers. Don't sit there worrying about what 0.48 or negative 0.19 is. This is something that goes well beyond what we would expect in an introductory level college course. Once you get past the results discussion, the last major section of the article is going to be the discussion. So this is where they're generally going to start by recapping kind of the highlights of the results, and they'll do it in words. So instead of all the statistics, it's just group A scored higher than group B, or variable A was negatively correlated with variable B. But they're going to interpret the results. So what does all this mean? Why should we care? What are some implications of the results? Were their hypotheses supported? And if not, they might start speculating, well, we didn't get the results we expected, so why do we think we got the results that we did? Is there some other explanation that perhaps they had overlooked, or an alternative theory that they might propose? And then they're going to start giving suggestions for future research. It might be to address limitations of their own study. It might be because the results just raise further questions, because whenever in science, whenever you answer a question, you always wind up with more. So this is often how they're going to end their discussion section. When you're reading an article, that is the bulk of what you need to focus on. There is some other stuff that you'll find in the article. So at the end, they'll have a reference list listing all the sources that the author has used in writing this article. This can be important if you're doing future research on a topic. It can be important if you're writing a comprehensive research paper. But when you're just reading the article to understand it, you can ignore the reference list. Some articles will end there. Others will have an appendix at the end, or occasionally more than one. If they have an appendix, then you should read through this. This is going to be supplementary information to kind of expand on what's in the article. So, for example, a common reason where you might find this is if they created their own survey that hadn't been used before. In the article, they might give you one or two questions, and then they would put the full text of it in the appendix. So if you read through that, it gives you a better sense of the kinds of questions that they were asking their participants. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, by all means, please email me, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.